On Tuesday, Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, basically gave Anthropic a Friday deadline to say yes, otherwise they're going to cancel. Pretty robust statement from Dario Amedi, the CEO of Anthropic, basically saying we cannot in good conscience apply with this. So there was a Friday 5 o'clock deadline, and basically Anthropic said we're not going to do it, at which point Pete Hegseth designated them a supply chain risk. Like, this is insane. Hello and welcome to another Slow Takes. It is Monday, the 2nd of March, 2026, 1 p.m. GMT. I'm Sam Illingworth from Slow AI, and I'm joined by my colleague.
Hello, my name is Lior. I run a newsletter called Exploring ChatGPT, and thank you so much for joining us.
And for people who are new to us and people who aren't new to us, basically every week at this time, Lior and I get together and we want to present the news that has happened in AI over the past week, but without any of the hyperbole. Thank you, loads of people, for joining us as ever. Feel free to use the chat. If you've got any questions, if you want to chip into the discussion, let us know. And if at any point Lior and I slip into hyperbole, please feel free to call us out on it. So there's a lot to cover this week. We might as well, and what will happen is we've got 5 stories we're going to try and get through, and then I'll post later in the day with the kind of wrap. First is the obvious elephant in the room, right, which is the whole Anthropic versus the Pentagon debate. So for those of you who've maybe been living under a rock the past week, basically last Monday, the Pentagon demands unrestricted AI access to the use of Claude. So Anthropic had a massive $200 million contract with the US defense and with the Pentagon, and basically they said that they've got 2 red lines, one of which is they don't want the AI technology to be used for citizen surveillance, and the other is they don't want to use it for autonomous weapons. On Tuesday, Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, basically gave Anthropic a Friday deadline to say yes, otherwise they're going to cancel the contract. Pretty robust statement from Dario Amedi, the CEO of Anthropic, basically saying we cannot in good conscience apply with this. So there was a Friday 5 o'clock deadline, and basically Anthropic said we're not going to do it, at which point Pete Hegseth designated them a supply chain risk. Like, this is insane. This is what they basically call foreign agents, Hawaii or something like that. It's pretty intense. And then on Friday evening after this, Trump put out a Truth Social statement, which is his way of basically announcing policy these days, that blacklists the whole of Anthropic. So basically saying anybody in the Department of Defense or government contractors cannot use Anthropic anymore. And then the contract went to OpenAI. OpenAI allegedly have got the same guardrails in place, that we'll see. So is that a fair summary, Lior, of where we're at? It's happened quite quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a fair summary. I think before I get into my opinions on all this, in our notes, you actually mentioned that Anthropic, for example, had already had some deals with certain government agencies and certain companies as well. So I think it's a good point also that you mentioned, not here publicly, but just in our notes, that actually this is not necessarily a battle of good versus evil, because both companies have done things that people might have certain opinions on. And the goal here is not to get too political, but to just give kind of a little bit deeper than background information and kind of no hype type of style. So I'll just start by saying it's kind of one of those things where if you don't get it from me, you're going to get it from the guy down the block. And in this case, the guy down the block was OpenAI. But it's clear as day that obviously they went to Anthropic first because they got something special. So otherwise they would have went to OpenAI first, but they went to Anthropic first because clearly Anthropic stands out in this AI race, at least for now. This might be a big setback for them. So to elaborate on this point a little bit more, I will say I think that ordering agencies to not work with Anthropic completely is most likely a mistake, because in my opinion, this all kind of ties back to this race towards AGI. We got to be better than everybody else, right? And the more the merrier. I mean, personally, I think the government agencies should be able to work with all AI companies, and that would probably only be better for the interests of the United States of America. And then to expand this a little bit more, in terms of supply chain risk, I think it's interesting that Hegseth only said that after this happened. And this is my theory on this. He probably was waiting to say that until after they denied the deal, because this could be related to that recent China hack that occurred. Hence a supply chain risk, because we get everything from China, which quick shout out to Chris from Toxec, TOXSEC. We discussed this slightly as well, but I have a little bit more to add here now that a couple more days have passed since this all happened. So apparently, in terms of supply chain risk and China, the connection there is that China was able, to state it simply, just download 80 to 90% of Claude. So that's according to Chris from Toxec. So basically, thanks, Chris. That could be the reasoning for it. And he probably didn't mention anything about a supply chain risk until after they decided not to sign that piece of paper. And also there's something to be said that, there was one of the main things was mass surveillance here. Mass surveillance has been around well before AI. The difference now is scale. And then also, again, shout out to Chris from Toxec, a predictive form of surveillance that would be possible with AI.
Minority report surveillance, right? Basically, this is what we're talking about.
Yeah. And then last thing that I have to mention about this is that I actually found a statement from OpenAI about this.
Oh, cool.
So I'm just going to read off a few bullet points. If anybody wants to find the statement, it's actually on OpenAI's website. And it's a super long statement. So I'm sure there's some fine print below this that says how they're working around this. But the three main points were no use of OpenAI technology for mass domestic surveillance, no use of OpenAI technology to direct autonomous weapon systems, and no use of OpenAI technology for high-stakes automated decisions. And if you go further into the article, there's some more details. But one of the main things I noticed is they want to keep a human in the loop, or humans in the loop in this whole process.
Good to see.
So I recommend people actually go look at that statement and dive a little bit deeper into the whole situation.
No, for sure. And I want to pick up on a few things you said there, because it's really important. I put out a post yesterday on Slow AI that looks into this a bit more. And exactly as Leo says, it's not about good versus evil. Anthropic have done some pretty shady stuff. They're we don't need to get political about it, but they have contracted with Palantir, which people will have opinions on. They've been involved in the extraction of other political leaders from countries and stuff like that. You basically, and what Leo and I try to do is provide you with the facts so that you can make your own decisions about what tools you use that back up your own policies and ideologies. That's all we can do. What I would say about OpenAI, that statement, man, is awesome in that I don't believe a word of it. Like, in politics, in everything, don't ever, in my opinion, don't ever listen to what people say, watch what they do instead. This is the same company who promised us they were never, ever going to have adverts, right? So if your red line is, I'm never going to have adverts, and then suddenly your shareholders are, you need to have adverts. If your whole red line is, we're always going to be open, we're never going to have shareholders, and then you're, I want to float and we're going to have shareholders. And then all of a sudden, my two red lines are, I'm never going to have autonomous weapons. I'm never going to have mass surveillance. Oh, well, apart from this one time where it's actually okay, yeah. So I love that they haven't put this on the website, and because I just don't believe it. And I think the whole thing is, it's posturing between Altman, between Modi, and they really dislike each other. We can see it in the Super Bowl commercials and everything. And again, this comes down to two people with massive egos, and people aren't inherently evil or good. They are very nuanced individuals, but these are two nuanced individuals who have huge stakes on the global political scene. And the last thing I'll say is, Pete Hegseth can say that Anthropic is a supply chain risk. And imagine you are Anthropic and you think to yourself, okay, we had a $200 million contract with the Department of Defense. But in doing that, we ignored all those contract offers, an order of magnitude higher from China, from Russia, from North Korea, from Iran. Are they suddenly going to be ignoring those again? I don't think so. So for me, this is what's really, really interesting. If you think it's a supply chain risk now, just wait till you see what happens when this organization realizes that they need to make the money from another country. So I think that's going to be a totally interesting play, man.
That's an interesting take. I actually agree with most of it. I disagree though. With the last part. I don't think that they're going to work. I mean, they could definitely work with other countries, But it's kind of it's an unfortunate state of the world. We're not all friends. I don't see them working with Iran or China, especially China. I mean, China just did them dirty in the worst way.
I can see that. I've definitely been provocative there, but what I can see them working with is working with Europe. And if we look at the trade blocks and the issues that are going on between US and Europe at the moment, this could hand a huge political advantage to that, or Canada or Mexico. Like, I think it's a huge mistake. And also it's creating a monopoly where it's basically saying, as a government agency, you have to use this one tool, rather than everybody on this call now probably uses multiple AI tools for different purposes, right? I mean, all I can say is, thank God they didn't decide to go with Copilot, because then we really would be in trouble.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining. And as Colleen says, Hex gets saying it's good for their branding and positioning. I think that's totally true. And Colleen makes a really good point there. I think a lot of people will actually join up to Anthropic off the back of this, because they think that Anthropic is somehow the white knight in all of this. But again, I would, as Leo and myself have said, I just encourage people to look a little bit deeper into what's going on before you make up your mind for yourself. Hi, Jen. Hi, Joseph. Hi, Jessica. Great to hear from you all. So we're going to move on to our second story then, if that's okay, Leo. So I thought this was going to be the biggest story, and then obviously the Anthropic one broke, right? But Jack Dorsey, who I have opinions on, but who is the former CEO of Twitter, now X, and is now in charge of Block, which is kind of a massive corporation that supplies Square, Cash App, Afterpay and stuff like that. He basically cut 40% of the staff this week instantly. And normally when you'd see this, he blamed AI tools, but not the way of AI tools are going to replace these people. We need to make money. We need to make savings to make it. Basically, what he said was that we are replacing 40% of our labor with AI tools now, in advance of what we think is going to happen. And insanely, this actually led, I'm just checking my stats, it led to a 24% increase in the stock price of Block. So what this tells you is that here's a guy who is making effectively a projection as to what's going to happen to the future workforce. And in doing so, you can look at his letter. It's quite well worded. The payouts are quite good, in inverted commas, for the staff members, but these are still people losing their jobs effectively on a hedge. And the markets have rewarded him for it. So yeah, I thought this was a huge news story. And yeah, we'd just be interested what your take was on it as well, Leo.
Yeah. First of all, I think it's the wrong choice. I'll just start with that. I'll give my own personal experience working with AI every day. Obviously, this is anecdotal. The more I work with AI, the more work I have to do. Because I can do so much more. So I think it's a huge mistake, because instead of firing these people, it's basically a long-term risk for a short-term reward. That's my opinion. A lot of these topics too, time will tell. And luckily things are moving so fast right now that we should know pretty quickly how this turns out. And in terms of Wall Street rewarding this, that's a no-brainer. Obviously they're going to reward this. They just cut their expenses by who knows how many millions or billions of dollars. Basically, yeah, this improves their bottom line immediately. And that's why Wall Street's rewarding it immediately. But in my opinion, this largely degrades their long-term growth. And when I say long-term, because AI is moving so fast, long-term doesn't have to mean 5 years. It could be 5 months.
For sure.
So I think it actually ties back into, in our last live stream, we spoke about IBM.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember how many, it was a couple tens of thousands of junior engineers. So yeah, I think it's a long-term risk for a short-term reward, and more likely than not, based on my own anecdotal experience, and this is just me, I'm sure many people that use AI daily, I do, would agree, that actually they're busier than ever. So
that's a great point. And it picks up on a lot of the research that's going on there at the moment as well, that if you're working for a company, AI can free you time up, but then that company is expecting you to use that time to continually work for that company. If you're a solopreneur or in the creator economy, it's slightly different because you can free up that time for yourself to do extra work. I think there's a huge issue there with the supply chain risk again, right? To use that phrase, but the pipeline. If you are not training up juniors. Lawyers are a really good example here. If you're not training up junior lawyers and you're outsourcing all of that, and paralegals, you're outsourcing all of that to AI, what happens in 5 and 10 years' time? You're not having, I hope to God, you're not having a laptop in the courtroom with the barrister just coming out of the top, right? It's just not gonna work. Yeah, Anna's asked how it's impacting the bottom line. Did they show stats or just statement? So Anna, Dorsey's basically projecting all of this. He's projected what the bottom line he thinks will look in terms of the savings that are figured. And again, why we'd encourage everyone to look at the facts and just use a bit of critical thinking. Everyone here, as I know you will. Dorsey has a history of overhiring. He doubled the workforce between 2022 and 2024. And you see this time and time again, post-COVID, people massively overhired. And what we're seeing now is people correcting for that using AI as an excuse. I mean, even Altman himself said it last week that people are using AI as an excuse to get rid of people. And that's what's happening. I think that two things here. I think that Dorsey's realized that Block is massively overstaffed for what it is. And he's using AI as a way to come back to the actual workforce size that he needs. And secondly, I think he's a smart guy. Of course he is. He's seen the future direction. He's been the first to jump on it, and he's made waves and made lots of short-term money, investments, and reputation off the back of it. People, the next 2-3 people big companies to do it might get the same ROI, but after that, that's going to be a huge change. So I'd totally chime in with what Leo had said as well. Short term, this might work. Medium term, it's going to kick them in the butt. And medium term is very different these days. Medium term, as Leo says, is 1 quarter. It's not even 5 years away. Again, just to pick up on stuff that I've been writing about as well in a post last week about the human skills that we need. This is what's essential. The moat for technical expertise has been removed by a lot of AI tools, what you can do. I built a website in a few hours and updated it over the weekend using Claude Code, even though I can't really code that myself anymore. But I have all the human skills that are needed to enable me to succeed in my place of work in terms of critical thinking, judgment, empathy, discernment, and they're skills that AI will never be able to learn. Yeah. And if we're removing the workforce, and to go back to a phrase that Leo said earlier, the human in the loop, if you want to have the human in the loop, we need to make sure there's a pipeline for the human in the loop all the way through. So yeah, I think it's going to be one to watch going forward. And yeah, I mean, I'll refrain from my unfiltered thoughts on Jack Dorsey for another time, perhaps. So yeah, exactly. As PJ said, what was once called soft skills, I make an argument that we should be calling these human skills instead. Colleen's put, at Google, they can't get their own employees to use AI at the rate they want to because they have so many old school employees been there 10 plus years. That's a great point, Colleen. Also makes me think I'm old school now, which is definitely true. So a third story that I picked on the surface is a little bit lighter, but actually it's really not. So I don't know if people saw this, but basically Burger King have employed OpenAI to develop some AI-powered employee headsets at 500 US restaurants. And basically these headsets, so when you go through the drive-through or whatever, it's just a normal headset, but it's got AI embedded within it. And it listens out for welcomes, pleases, thank yous, and it scores the friendliness of the employee. So I have thoughts on this, Leo, but what was your initial take, I guess, when you saw that story and looked into it a bit more?
Oh yeah, initial take, super creepy. And the way you titled this topic, surveillance with a smile, is hilarious. So actually, yeah, my first take was super creepy. I think that this should be flipped in general in the workplace. It should be the other way around. It shouldn't be surveillance of humans by AI. It should literally just be flipped. It should be humans surveilling AI. So the other way around. And that's across the workplace. At least they're not replacing everybody with AI, which I'm sure that's coming down the line as well. But just to backtrack a little bit, I think this also applies to the last topic in general. As we see more layoffs, this is not a road we want to go down for humanity. We don't want to see mass unemployment. People will have a lack of purpose in life. And I don't know if it's a hot take or not, but mass unemployment leads to universal basic income. And that's not a road that I necessarily want to go down as a society. I think that people need to have a purpose in life. And part of that purpose is actually So yeah, first take off the bat, super creepy to be basically surveilling people for friendliness. What if somebody has a bad day? Everybody has a bad day. And everybody's been to the drive-through. They're not always the most friendly in the world. It is what it is. And I mean, maybe for good reason that on that specific day something happened and they don't say please and thank you. So that's my take on it.
I think it's a great take. A few things I guess to pick up on. Me and you will probably have disagreements on you because I actually think it's a good thing. And I think eventually, way too optimistic and utopian in my thoughts, but eventually, and this is a discussion for another day, I'd like AI to take people's jobs so that people don't have to work doing jobs, but instead can create things and be creators and poets and dancers and sculptors and whatever they want. But that's a topic for another time. And it's my wildly utopian mindset. Colleen put a really good point in the chat. What about if you're neurodivergent? Some people can't handle eye contact, etc. So really great point, Colleen. And also happiness and pleasantries are very subjective. Like the way that I am, the way that I say thank you, the way that I say please might be very different from somebody else's. My resting face sometimes can be a bit scowly, but that's just my resting face. And what I really worry about this technology is that it's forcing us to be compliant, and it's forcing us to be compliant in a way that certain people demand us to be. So when I read this news story, it made me think of two films. The first film it made me think of is Office Space. If anyone's watched that film, classic 90s, early 2000s film, where basically Jennifer Aniston plays a character who's working at the equivalent of a Frankie and Benny's type restaurant. And she has Flair employer badge. And why haven't you got enough flair on their badges? And she's like, I hate working here, basically. And it made me think of that. You're allowed to hate working somewhere. You shouldn't be forced into that replica. And the other film it made me think of was Stepford Wives, right? This technology, which is obviously designed by a man, which is trained on the internet by men, which is, it just is massively into the patriarchy of what we expect women and people to be. And that whole, I'm going to be here serving you with my face, my smile and be happy to serve is just so wrong. And I love your point that exactly this, it shouldn't be AI surveying humans. It should be the humans surveying AI. I don't know how people are going to push back against this. Again, I've got a piece coming out on Thursday that's looking at how people use AI in the onboarding process, which is similar to this in terms of facial recognition, voice tone. And it's just trying to make us conform to a very, very specific point of view, which is very heterogeneous, white, male, neurotypical. And yeah, if OpenAI are against mass surveillance, as they say they are on that statement, I would say this is probably it contradicts that point of view, because if this isn't surveillance, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say for people who are out and about at Burger King restaurants in the States this weekend, and you see people who look very unhappy, but with like a very, very forced smile, just be kind to them. And, just in general, be kind to them. Like I've worked those jobs before. Many people have worked in the service industry. They're really important jobs. They're really hard jobs. You're allowed to live a life and exist as a human being without an AI telling you that you need to up your happiness metric by 0.1 if you want to be considered for that promotion going forward. It just seems completely unnecessary.
Yeah, sounds like a Black Mirror episode.
Every single news story sounds like a Black Mirror episode, right? It's just life imitating art. Just going back through some of the chats. So like Jen said that humans are already struggling with rating performance and soft skills or human skills. So how can we program a bot to do that? Also, that is expecting everyone to behave the same, which is not realistic. Jen, that's a great point. Like, how can we subjectively say, oh, Leo is a really happy or helpful or engaging or empathetic person? You can't objectively say that. So how can we expect a bot to do it unless it conforms to a very, very specific type of doing it? People are enjoying the Office Space shout out. Yeah, as Caro also says, every news story is a Black Mirror episode these days. PJ's asked about, is AI disrupting traditional education expectations? PJ, we can come on to that on another talk maybe, but yes, basically. Oh no, Raghav has told me that Claude Code and Claude is down for many users. Raghav, don't be telling me this. It's destroyed my workflow now for the rest of the day. But a good point. And this is what I came to the conclusion on with regards to the Anthropic Pentagon piece. If we become over reliant on one particular tool, which I probably am, to be honest with Claude, what happens if your country decides it no longer wants to have that tool? Or what happens if that tool decides that it needs to increase its premium subscription costs by 2 orders of magnitude in order to appease the shareholders? Or what happens if the server goes down? Or what happens if there's a cybersecurity attack? There needs to be an element of resilience, I think, in our use of these tools, irrespective of whether or not we think they're good or evil. So again, we don't need to get political. This is just something that's happening. So Trump basically created an executive order through the Department of Justice called the AI Litigation Task Force. And the idea is basically to sue states with AI regulation. So a lot of different states, Colorado being one, New York being one, actually putting through some quite progressive AI regulation bills or trying to. But the Department of Justice doesn't want this to happen. And again, for non-US watchers, the differences between state legislation, federal legislation are complex and murky. But effectively what the Department of Justice is trying to do is to stop any litigation or any licensing or kind of stops or guardrails at a state level that goes against what it wants to have pushed through. So broadly speaking, the Department of Justice wants AI to be rolled out broadly for various reasons, lobbying, etc. And any states that don't comply to this, they don't. Now, interestingly, they've got a really, really powerful bargaining tool in this, and this is BEAD. I don't know if people know what BEAD is, but it's basically I can't remember the exact acronym. I'm just going to look it up. It's about broadband. So it's equity of broadband. What is it? Yeah, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. So this is central government funds to help broadband be rolled out at the state level to everybody so that everybody can get accessible broadband. And the DOJ have basically said, if you don't conform to our low barrier AI legislation, we are going to remove that funding from your state. So for me, this has huge implications for laissez-faireism, for your own state-by-state governance, and also for what the United States more broadly wants to adopt in terms of legislation and litigation going forward. So, and again, apologies because I'm UK-based, so I'm not always across all the nomenclature here. But Leo, I just wondered what your take was there on this.
Yeah, I'm in New York, and I don't know how this all works. The difference between the federal legislation and state legislation is it's such a big gray area. I do think states should be able to make this decision on their own, but I don't think that fixes the problem because, and we've seen this with other big tech companies. For example, if let's say New York, right? If New York starts implementing some AI legislation, then those companies can just leave New York. And it's that simple. And we've seen that before with many big tech companies. So even though I think the states should be able to make their own decision on this and make their own legislation on this, I don't think that it solves the issue of regulation. And regulation, you can attack that from so many angles. So I think that more likely than not, the regulation that the federal government wants to prevent, it's probably all across the board, probably all regulation, because this again ties back towards that race towards AGI. We want to be the best in the world, right? So if one of our states is preventing us from doing that, we want to stop them. And that's kind of the moral of the story here, I believe. But again, I don't think that just tied back. States should be able to make their own legislation regarding AI. Will it change anything? Probably not.
And I think that's for sure. And I think dialing it back, that's a constitutional matter, right? Irrespective of whether it's AI or anything else, that idea of the state being able to make their own decision is what they should be able to do. That's how the US operates. Annotated memory has a really good point that we're getting to the level where technology is advancing so fast that legislation has no time to catch up. Agreed, the horse has bolted, and all of this legislation, guardrails, ethics should have been baked in from day one, but it hasn't, which means that it's really important upon us. Again, I think it comes down to two things, right? You need to have bottom up and you need to have top down. So top down is putting pressure on government, it's putting pressure on your legislators, it's putting pressure on AI companies to regulate effectively, to govern easily technically implemented on. And then you need to have the bottom up, which is the upskilling, which is where we teach critical AI literacy. We encourage people not to share images of their children online. We have conversations this. We need both of those things because we can't rely on a top-down intervention from governments that in the West change every 4 to 5 years. Like, it doesn't matter what political party you belong to. If we can't rely on just bottom up, because ultimately, unless we have an extremely large collective, it doesn't turn the dial enough. So we need to basically have both of those there. Cool. So I'm just gonna, and Chip puts out the digital divide lib. So the digital divide in terms of many different things, but one of them can be around broadband. So people in rural areas might have less access to high-speed broadband than people in metropolitan areas. But then also we could say that the digital divide could be classified as the extent to which people are upskilled on their use of AI versus not. And as Karen's put there, we need to have individual responsibility for AI literacy and comprehension. This ties back to an earlier question around education, and that needs to be baked in from preschool all the way through to higher education as well. I think we've addressed like most of the questions if we've gone through. We'll probably wrap in a couple of minutes. So Leo and I tend to end all of these takes by just recommending another Substacker that we're reading and that we're liking. But before we do that, Leo, is there anything that you wanted to cover that we didn't get around to, or that you wanted to say that you didn't get a chance to?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you all for being here. And special thanks to Sam, because he puts together these topics for us every week, which definitely takes some effort. And there's always something to talk about, which is pretty awesome. Yeah, before we get into our Substackers here, I want to link, that's the YouTube channel where we'll be posting these live streams as well as some clips. So I'd appreciate it if you guys could head over there and subscribe. It is free. Unlike most things these days, you wake up, you breathe, and then money leaves your bank account. This is free. So I'd super appreciate it. And Sam as well. We're in this together. So yeah.
Thanks, Matt. And yeah, thanks. Leo's doing a huge amount of work getting us on YouTube as well. And I really appreciate 150 of you dialing in. And in the interim, Leo and I both really open. If you've got any questions about exploring ChatGPT, about slow AI, just about slow takes in general, drop us a DM, put us a note, a comment. In the next hour or so, I'm going to a really important platform. And it's really important that we platform voices from across the ecosystem. So like every slow AI, every slow takes, we're just going to like platform somebody. So the person I would to recommend this week is Chief Absurdist Officer. It's actually a double one, right? So they do an amazing publication called Our Human, and they've just started a new series called Not Rising. And it's a really cool way of basically being against the rising algorithm in Substack, which is definitely weighted towards certain people's, and instead hopes to platform lots of different writers who've got really unique and interesting takes. So check it out. And the first person to be platformed this week is Jennifer Hoole. And Jennifer runs an amazing Substack, which I'll just put in the chat, called Uncompliant. Jennifer talks about HR in a way that actually is super interesting and insightful and funny, and incredibly dark sometimes as well. Jennifer's also going to be on a Slow AI live with me later this week. So I'd really recommend checking out Jennifer Hoole at Uncompliant and Chief Absurdist Officer, who have started this new Substack called Not Rising. That's my recommendation for the week. Leo.
Awesome. Yeah, mine is, there he is, Daniel Nest. I also do weekly live streams with him, and I recommend him because he just have fun with it. Kind of me. I think instead of taking everything so seriously, sometimes it's cool to just take a step back, breathe, and have fun, and realize the best way to build with AI is to just nerd out and just do it and just have fun with it. And that's what I'm all about too. That's how I got to where I am. Because if I didn't enjoy what I'm doing, then I wouldn't keep doing it. So Daniel Nest.
Cool. Thanks, man. So yeah, we'll see you all same time, same place next week. If you've got any questions, just throw it into the comments on the subsequent post, into our DMs, or on the YouTube channel. Thanks, Leo, so much for joining me and hosting this with me. And thanks everyone for all dialing in. We really appreciate you all. And yeah, stay safe and go slow.
Bye now.